Got those wheel chucks from Harbor Freight. Backwards and forwards. And then we're going to check the back wheel first. So here's our back wheel. Now I always take a wrench and break them free. Before I jack it up, I always take my wrench and then just break them loose while it's on the ground. And then once they're loose, then I jack it up and I put a jack stand underneath it. Getting it off the ground, you don't need it too high. So that's one jack point. And then I have a jack stand. And then I also have it wheel chocked. And then emergency brake. And then I shake it. Shake the car. Make sure it's set. And then I just pull the wheel off. You don't need it very high, just enough to get the wheel off. So the weight is being supported by that jack stand. I always like to go heavy duty jack stands. This is like a heavy duty, it's a Harbor Freight special. This is a Harbor Freight special as well. So correction, obviously if we're checking the brakes we can't have the emergency brake on. I probably should have put the wheel box on the front wheels, but obviously, so scratch that. So I'm just going to hit a little WD-40 here and just kind of rubber mallet this and bust this drum loose. It's kind of coming. Just hitting it like that, and I have these little pig mat, so I'm going to spray and I don't want to get my driveway all messy. WD-40, I sprayed on that hub, and I just I bumped it out, and now I can work it by itself with my hand. Don't need any special tools on these. Okay, front shoe, leading shoe, and obviously this is drum brakes. I'm not a crazy fan of drum brakes, but I've worked on enough of them. We got good, maybe, I could get a ruler, but those are well within specs. Let me get a ruler. Tool ruler. I'm going to use millimeters. So we're looking at 6 millimeters. So that's well within. You can look up the specs. But these, let's say 6. Move it there. About 5 millimeter. And we just check all around, make sure the lining isn't cracked, make sure it isn't glazed. Glazed would mean if I was beating on the brakes and they were cooked, a little bit of glazing there. But that's 5 millimeter on the front shoe, and then on the leading shoe we see a little bit of wear here, but that's all normal. We don't see any glazing. Let's just check here at the thinnest point. I think about 6 maybe. 5.5 millimeter. So yeah, everything looks good. I had these changed years ago. I had all brand new hardware. Wheel cylinders aren't leaking. The boots aren't leaking. So yeah, there's the boots here. The boots look intact. There's no leakage. There's no. It seems to be sealed okay. It's a little dirty, obviously. Brake dust, but I don't see any leak. I don't see any tears. My emergency brake, linkage, adjustment, springs. Yeah, these springs are fairly new. So I had them put new springs on when I had them. The retainer clips. Got to have the little brake tool to take these off. Don't use vice grips. My dad always used vice grips for this. For these, I got the brake tool once I learned how to work on cars. So much better. Let me get the Craftsman. I like Craftsman or Snap-on or Matco. kind of really believe in good quality tools. Used to be a mechanic a long time ago. But yeah, and then of course here's the retainer. This is a Craftsman retainer. So obviously it goes over that. Press in and then click, and that frees that keyed. And then this little guy, when you take that spring or you put it on the end here, there's a ton of mini videos, and then you use brake tools. Don't try to use vice grips. Please buy brake tools. I don't know how much this cost. This is over 30 years old. These are over 30 years old, so I don't know how much they cost new. Obviously you can get the cheap knockoffs, you can get the crappy Chinese stuff, but I would probably, if you're going to do brake jobs, a lot of brake jobs, and you have drum brake cars, I would invest in good tools. Matco, Snap-on, Craftsman, and I forget, this may have been like, can't remember the price, but invest. Don't use vice grips. My dad, when we were working on our old Chevelle, he always hated to do the brakes because he would use vice grips, and it always cringe because it's a pain in the butt. So that's my little rant. But please, if you're going to do brake jobs, please invest in the right tools. Like I said, these are over 30 years old, and I've done a lot of brake jobs, a lot of drum brake jobs. So if you only do it occasionally, just rent the tools or borrow a buddy's. But if you're going to do a lot of brake jobs, invest in the tools. Let's go to look at our drum here. So here's our max diameter. I'm not going to scope this out, but I am going to check to see if there's any grooving. You don't want this to be a record. I don't see any, and this looks like an maybe the original drum. And then I run a finger across here. Obviously I got gloves on just to check the ridge. I don't see, the surface looks pretty good. It's a little glazed, but that's normal. I'm pretty pleased with this. This is just a brake check. Obviously if I had the brake calipers or to measure this it's obviously max diameter, as you can see here. But we're not turning these, we're just inspecting. So these I'm pretty pleased with. Obviously would be most concerned if there was grooves, deep grooves, then you'd have to replace your drums. But I'm pretty pleased with this. Like I said, I check brakes quite often, and these look good to me. So before we button it up, we check this spring down here. Look good. Check this. Yeah, these are fairly brand new. And our cables, everything looking good. Pretty pleased with this. Obviously we got some brake dust. Pretty pleased with this. Everything was looking really good. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, see a common thing here, Permatex. I like their products. Anti-seize lubricant. I buy this stuff by the case. Not really. But I use this extensively on all parts. Spark plugs, anything that there's two dissimilar metals or anything that I need to get the, I use it extensively on the lug studs. And then we're going to put a nice bead here and then here. I hit it with some WD-40, but we're going to put a nice bead here and here and here, just so it's a little easier to get that brake drum off. I've used anti-seize forever my cars, and then I'm just going to put a little bit here and then smear it with my finger, because next time I want to take this off, I want it to be easy to take off. So I'm smearing it here, here, and then we're also smeared on this the right there. A little bit goes a long way. Okay, isn't that pretty? It looks like kindergarten finger paint. But yeah, I spread it all over. As you can see here, I do this on all the brakes that I do, just to make it easier to get that drum off. and then all the lug studs, and we're gonna torque these. But since we're here, let's check suspension. There's my sway bushings. They're a little cracked. Control bar bushings, it doesn't look cracked. We're gonna wiggle it. I'm wiggling it. Obviously the camera's shaking. I don't see any play in it. I don't think the bushing is wore out. Here's the other bushing for my sway bars. Don't see anything, no issues there. Check my stops. My stops are good. The most important thing on the stops is make sure they haven't been used, or it looks like they've been used. This has not. And obviously we check here as well because we don't want any imprints. Now if you were letting somebody borrow your car and they went four-wheeling, all you'd have to do is check the stops to see if you have any imprints, and that means they bottomed out and joyrode your car. So let's check that sway bar bushing. Looks to be intact and good. Doesn't look to be cracked. There's that other trailing arm bushing. We look good there. And let's check our brake lines. So that's brake line, and then brake line here, and then this is the emergency brake. There's no breakage. There's no rubbing marks. The spring looks good. Everything looks good. There's no wear marks. Obviously, if you saw wear marks, then you replace that. Check the boot. Boot looks good. Check the shocks. Shock mount looks good. And then let's check this bushing up here. And let's shake this. I'm shaking it. I know you can't tell. I don't feel any play in it. See, we look good there. Let's check our shocks. Obviously, we don't see any leakage. The mounts look good. I don't see any leakage. I'm shaking it. They're solid. And then since we're here, we're going to check our muffler. This is a new muffler, last July. But if you have an older muffler, just want to check it out. And we're going to go underneath the car once it's back on its feet. And then we're also going to check our U-joints as well. But since we're here, since we have the tire off, we're just going to check this area. Make sure there's no rubbing marks. There's another control arm. Looks good there. The bushings look intact. And then as you see these rust spots, I always power wash it and then hit it with a little bit of white paint, white high performance spray paint. That's way I can see where the rust is coming out. I like lighter colors because it shows dirt, it shows grease. If this was leaking, and I do see a little bit of rust there. So I'm going to power wash this afterwards and then hit that with a little bit of spray paint. And then make sure the differential's not leaking. Now these are those springs, EMU springs, heavy duty springs. I'll put the link in the description. I like them. They do raise the back end up about 4 inches, but they're heavy duty, they're stiff. I actually had a local shop, Automatics, put them in. Pretty pleased with their work. Those are about maybe 8 years old. Pretty pleased with them, but they do ride stiff. So I check that, and then I check the frame here. Obviously make sure there's no bends or cracks or flaking, and I do that same. I power wash it and then hit those rust spots. You could obviously go fancy and use the Eastwood products, but everything else looks good here. So now we got the drum on. We lubed it. We lubed the studs. Nice and tight, and obviously once we put the wheel on, it'll tighten it up. We got the tire off. These are Firestone. I probably would have went with the Yokohama's, Michelin's or Goodyear's. Firestone ain't bad. These are the LE2 model. They're not bad, but I probably would have went with the Yokohamos or the Goodyear or the Michelin's. Probably the top of the line, most expensive tire, because again, we live in Colorado and we get snow, and obviously invest in a good snow tire as well. So we're just going to check to make sure there's no bulging around the rim. I don't see any bulging. I don't see any scuff marks because I didn't hit the curbs. Tire looks good. The weights do look secure. The holes don't look like they're cracked. There's a little bit of marring there, but the lug holes look good. Rims look good. The valve stem looks good. Check the tread. So obviously you do the Lincoln head test. I have more tread on these than the Lincoln head. I mean, it's way more. It's not concerned, but I checked the tread. Now I put these at the maximum pressure. Maximum pressure I think is 44 pounds. 48 pounds. Put them about to 50 first because I don't drive this very much, and as you can see here, because the metal is wearing a little bit more than the outside. My brother-in-law argued with me and complained because I took his other brother's car and I had it stored here for a while, and I pumped the tires up because it's pretty tight, about 50 or about 8 pounds more than the max, because we had it stored at our garage and I didn't know for how long he would be because he was on travel. So he picked it up and I left the tires as is, and I guess in the winter time his brother says, well, the tire pressure was too high and he couldn't get off of the street because in the snowstorm. I sort of laughed because yeah, tire pressure is very important. Obviously when you're four-wheeling, if you want to tire air down to get more traction, you can. It's just you have to air back up when you hit the highway. So I'm kind of lazy and I don't, but as you can see here, my tire tread pattern, there's a little bit more wear in the middle. I'm okay with that. You know, it's whatever your tire person recommends. I always pump them a little bit higher, just because my cars sit for a while. I don't drive them very often, but overall our tires look good here. So let's flip the rim around. Now I may hit that with a little bit of, because that's aluminum and that's steel. So I may finger paint these a little bit just to make sure they're, and then my little cap is good. Check there's no bulging. I don't see any bulging on the tires. So it's overall looks good. It's a little dirty obviously. Okay, after you He-Man the tire on here, I always put these on by hand. I know NASCAR, they glue them in the wheels, but I'm not NASCAR and I don't want to strip out my... So I put these on by hand. And obviously by hand, I considered about the torque sequence. But I just want to make sure that it's... So yeah, tighten them by hand. Make sure there's no cross-threading. Don't want to strip them. And I'm not, right now, at this point, I'm not worried about torque sequence yet, because I'm just getting them started. I do by hand, just to make sure that that one's a little hard. I'm going to put a wrench on it a little bit, and that spins freely. On my star, I painted one end so I know which one is the end I need. I could obviously put my impact on this, but I'm not going to, because I'm just doing it by hand. So I'll tighten that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. I always do star when I tighten, and then I want to torque these. I want to torque these to 75. They're aluminum wheels. 75 is always my go-to. Check your wheel manufacturer, what they would torque them to. I'm using a spinner wrench here. I could obviously use my impact, but if you use your impact, don't rip on it and torque them down. You can use your impact to get them down snug, but don't rip on your impact and just grind them on there. Don't do that. I hate when people do that. Just take the time, and if you have an impact, get it to snug and then torque it with a torque wrench, because there's no reason that you need to strip these studs out. Again, NASCAR, they super glue these into the rims. Obviously it's NASCAR and they have the money to replace studs and have unlimited money, but I don't want to replace studs. So in all the cars I've always used anti-seize and always torqued, always crossed, and then I always torqued the wheels. It's the Craftsman torque wrench. I'd recommend investing in a good torque wrench if you're going to be doing a lot of engine work or working on cars. Obviously I have a 6-inch extension. It's just a little easier. You can do the math, but this is going to take up some of my torque. I'm still going to put it at 75 because I'm not a rocket scientist. This is my daily driver and this is the way I've been doing it for 30 years. It's only because this is to give me easier to get in there. And obviously, so I'm going to do this one. And then star up. Then you get the point. I did want to note, I already lowered it before it's already on the ground. So I don't want to tighten it when it's in the air, and I don't want to tighten it while the transmission it's in park. I want to have it on the ground. Now we do the front. We're going to check the front. So we're going to do our same method. We're going to loosen these while it's on the ground. The wheels are already chalked and blocked, and we're going to loosen these by hand. You can use your impact to take it off. Then we're going to check the front brakes. Note, when it's this point, you don't want to take all these completely out. You just want to break them loose while it's on the ground. And then we're going to jack it up, and then we're going to take those all off. You don't want to take them all off when it's on the ground. Once we jack it up, once there's no weight on it, we will take them all out. Okay, this is our jacking. Jacked it right underneath the ball joints. Unfortunately, my jack on this side couldn't get to that point. It was over here. So this is the lower control arm, our jacking point. And then by the frame, I have this one by the frame there. And then I wiggle the car. Make sure it doesn't slip off. So all the weight is being held by this jack, and then there is some pressure. There is some pressure on that, but it's not holding the weight of the car. So in theory, there's 2 spots, but you want to have the most secure spot. Nice sturdy jack. Do not rely on that alone to hold the car. Do not. Please invest in decent jack stands. You don't want the car to crush you. These are Harbor Freight. These are the heavy duty. I don't know what tonnage, but I got them because they have high reach. The little tiny flimsy little ones, if you have a tiny little car, fine, but with a big SUV, you need a lot of reach. So we're going to take this wheel off and check the brakes. Okay, wheel is off. Obviously you can see my fingerprint from last time. We're going to check the rotor. We don't see any excessive grooving. There is a little bit of top grooving there. Very top. We could run our finger across that rotor. Not too concerned. There's a little bit of wear mark. I don't know what's going on there. It's rusty because it's been sitting for a while. I'm not concerned about the rust. But I am concerned about that top groove. I don't know if you can. It's going to be right here. I don't know what's causing that. I'm not too concerned. It does look kind of. I may have to have these turned, but not now in the next brake job. Not too worried about it. So now let's check the pad life. So this, and there's the rotor, the tip of that hanger, that's the rotor, that's the pads, that's the springs to retain them. So I'd say we got about maybe 10 millimeter pad life. Pretty pleased with these. So yeah, this is the rotor here. Can you see that move? I don't know if you can see that move, but that's the rotor. Yep. So yeah, that's the rotor there at the end of the hook of the light. That's the pad in the middle, and that's the pad mounting. So we got plenty of pad left. Pretty pleased on it. Looking good. Also check the calipers. Sure these aren't leaking. And then since we're here, check the CV boots, check the shocks, check your bottom out. I call them bottom out bumpers. Check your control arm bushings. They look good. Check all the suspension, check inner. That's outer boot, that's inner boot. I had these replaced when I bought the car. So those look good. Well, before I bought the car, they had one of these was leaking really bad, so all that grease was just getting everywhere, and you can see there's still a big gob of grease. But yeah, inner and outer boots were replaced in CVs. This sway bar, so here's, could probably be replaced. Not concerned about it. And this is sway bar bushing. Good here. Since we're down here, let's check rack and pinion. There's no leaks, and I'd prefer to get it back on its feet before we get underneath it anymore. But since we have the wheel off, I had the brake lines, new brake lines, put on a few years ago. I'm not too concerned. I don't see any cracks. I don't believe that's a crack. It's just a piece of dirt. So I don't see, yeah. See, that really gooped up all that grease. So if you have a broken CV boot, even front wheel drive, all that CV grease is going to get everywhere. Look how much it caked up over there. Caked it up. I haven't cleaned up all that. Embarrassed it. It's all goopy. You can even see here. That's more asphalt on the starter. So, looks a little bit crusted, a lot crusted actually. Upper ball joint. I had struts replaced when I got the car. So, control arm upper, control arm bushing. They don't look broken. Doesn't look bent. Looks like it's in good condition. Now I do want to make a note, now that we're here, now I'm going to have a little rant. These little 4Runners are good. You see that thing right there? not the light. That is the lower ball joint. That is the Achilles heel on these puppies. You'll see people that jack these puppies up with ginormous tires and jack them up, but this is your Achilles heel right here, this lower ball joint. I've read specs where you have to replace it about every 100,000 miles. Obviously, if you're doing off-roading, this thing's going to get a beating, but it's an Achilles heel. I had this one replaced, but if you have an unknown, make sure you check that out, and you probably want to have that replaced. I would recommend getting this replaced if you're going to off-road your vehicle, or if it's got big tires. I would definitely get a really hefty, beefy one of these lower control arm bushings. This is the Achilles heel of these 4Runners. You put monster tires on these, you use the OEM ball joints, going to put a lot of stress on that little spindle there. I mean, it's heavy duty, don't get me wrong, but it was never designed for big huge tires. So make sure you either get this inspected or replace it. If you're not confident to do it yourself, just have a shop do this work. But these are the Achilles heels on these. And it's kind of, I mean, no offense to Toyota, but this is kind of a spindly little control arm. No offense. But I'm used to big American 3/4 ton, 1 ton trucks. Well, these are massive. Big American beef, But, I mean, they're good, don't get me wrong, these Toyotas, but this is the Achilles heel. This is pretty beefy. But yeah, this ball joint here, lower ball joints, are the Achilles heel on these babies. If you do a lot of off-roading, if you do a lot of rock crawling, probably want to change these out more often, or get something that's industrial duty or that's for rock crawling. I noticed my desk guard's a little bent here. I don't know what that was all about. But yeah, that's the Achilles heel. But you want to inspect all this now that we're down here. We're going to put the wheel back on, and then we'll do another inspection underneath the car. But yeah, brakes look good. Okay, since we're here, we already torqued these. Let's check the tire pressure. So first, let's check to see what it needs to be at. And let's check the tire pressure. Check tire pressure all around, and then check your spare. I checked all the tire pressure. Now that we're down, now that the car's on all its wheels, there's no jacks, it's still being blocked. Let's shimmy under here. You can use cardboard. So let's check our rack and pinion. I don't see any leaks. Check exhaust. That's the sway bar bushing that we already checked. The boots look good for our rack and pinion. There's no cracks. And I could have, once the wheel was off, I could have checked the ball joints, but I recently had those replaced. But I see a little bit of moisture there. This is the rack and pinion. The bushings look okay, the mounts. Pretty pleased there. Check the other side. It's a little fresh, but I'm not concerned. Check the rag joint for the steering. I don't see it broken. I don't see any. This is the rag joint. I don't see any brakes. I don't see any areas of concern. So that's the steering. Up there is the steering. Let's check the shaft. Steering shaft, no leakage, no worn out, no bushings, no worn holes. This is the rag joint, and that's the rack and pinion where it connects. That looks good. The bushings look good for the rack and pinion. Pretty pleased with that. Let's check the front diff. We're just checking the U-joints. We can rock them, we can move them if we want. So it's loose because we don't have four-wheel drive engaged. We're wiggling it. Normally I would grease these, but I just recently greased these. There's Zert fittings here. There's a Zert fitting, I don't know if you can... Here, it's alright. There's a Zert fitting here. Yep, normally I would grease those, but we greased them last time. So I'm moving it back and forth, and this is the front differential. I don't see any areas of concern, and this is neutral because we don't have four-wheel drive engaged. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then now that we're up here, we're going to check brake lines and fuel lines. Again, no leakage, no wear marks, no rust, no corrosion. We look good there. I'm pretty pleased with that. Here is our exhaust. Now do note, that is the O2 sensor. That is upstream. I recently had these replaced. See the next video on emissions. Okay, this is a new exhaust. Okay, we're going to point with the white, those studs. On the original ones, they stripped out. That's why I had the new exhaust. So these eventually strip out. So this is the end of the light to show you holding the camera. So that's the O2 sensor upstream. Those stripped out. So I had Midas put on a new pipe, and then I had them put on a new cat. Here's the cat. You know what's very sad to me is people are stealing the catalytic converters and scabbing them for the parts or for the money, and that's really makes me mad because they're stealing them from people that need them, need the car. And I mean, theft is wrong any which way, but that's just weak. Anyways, so if you live in a high crime area where people are stealing your catalytic converters, maybe recommend putting a guard, maybe rig up for your car, or maybe have a machine shop rig up a steel plate and maybe put a lock to cover your catalytic converter or something, or maybe strap or lock your catalytic converter somehow. Not really sure. Like in this case, they may be able to put a brace here so that it couldn't be very easily to get to the catalytic converter, because what they do is they take a saw and just cut it, and obviously the SUVs are super easy to wiggle under, and you get a cordless sawzall and you got this off in a few minutes. What they need to do, the manufacturers or a company needs to come up with a way to make a plate that locks this in, and you have a keyed lock or something. Obviously if the thieves really want it, they're going to get past it, but maybe some sort of deterrent. Let's get back to our inspection here. So that's the exhaust. Check your exhaust, check your catalytic converter. This is downstream O2 sensor. These are fairly new, so I'm not too worried about them. And then I had him put a new muffler on. So now we're up at our transmission, and see that right there? This is our transmission. Automatic transmission. Well, let's finish our U-joint. This is our transfer case. and that's our U-joint for the front U-joint. There is the fuel filter. I change that maybe every other oil change. And right here, you want to use line wrenches. I forget which size, but you want to use line wrenches. Don't use vice grips. Use line wrenches for this. Now, in my experience on these, when I change this out, there's a little screw here. You take the little screw out, and I put some anti-seize on that. 2 wrenches. 1 on each side. 1 wrench to hold the filter, 1 wrench to hold the line. You crack the line loose, you're good. You want to do it when there's no pressure on the line, or maybe have the car sit. There's processes on instructions on how to do that. We're not going to do that right now. But my point is what this front one usually always leaks. And you really have to tighten it like a son of a gun to get it to stop leaking. So just warning, when you replace your fuel filter, and you should replace your fuel filter often. Probably more often than they recommend because of all the crap in the gas and stuff. But you don't want to get that crap in your injectors and jack up your fuel system. So I'm pretty conscientious on replacing all my fuel filters really often. Anyways, this front always leaks after you replace it. You have to really tighten this down like a mother. And I wish I was thinking of devising a system with a quick disconnect, but for now, this is what I'm living with. But yeah, you can see this. These are kind of rounded off a little bit. I've used regular line wrenches, but you have to tighten that down like a mother because it leaks. So just a warning. I do like they put splash guards. I do like that Toyota put splash guards and guard protectors over all the critical stuff. Transfer case looks good. This is where you drain it and fill it. There's a whole process on how to do that. You can look it up. But yeah, you should have your transfer case regularly serviced and the oil changed. Okay, let's go back to the transmission. So it's an automatic transmission. See that? I'm going to get on my gripe. I'm going to get on my rant for just a minute. Now, I have not yet done a transmission flush or drain. I've had a shop do it. And so I've had a shop do it. But I believe those, correct me if I'm wrong, that is the drain plug. Can you tell me why the hell most of the American cars don't have a drain plug for the automatic transmission? I've worked on Jeeps, I've worked on Chevelles, I've worked on trucks, GM mainly. None of them have a freaking drain plug. Why the hell don't you put a drain plug on the car? Usually what happens, like the Turbo 350s or the Turbo 400s, this is obviously GM, you gotta take all those freaking drain pan bolts out, 14, or there's a ton of them. Obviously you can use an impact or air tools or whatever, that's not the point. You just need to change your fluid. Why the hell did they not put a damn drain plug? That's my rant. Okay, so that's the drain plug. I believe so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to credit Toyota that they put a drain plug there. So we're good. Everything looks good up until this point. Transfer case looks good. Here's our U-joints for the back, and obviously because it's in gear, and it's really cool. They have Zert fittings. I would do Zert fittings, and I would do that, but I've already done that in last oil change. These are the fuel tank. These are the return line, fuel lines, etc. The fuel lines look good. Now, if your fuel lines are cracked, obviously replace them. And I do like the fuel tank that they have a nice metal pan to protect it. So if you're going four-wheeling, you have a nice little cage to protect it. Smart idea. So now let's creep on the back let's keep going here. Now let's check the body out. Now again, I painted a lot of this white so I could tell where there was any rust marks. But now running boards, as you can tell, there's big chunks taken out of the running boards. I didn't catch this in time. This is before I owned it. So I really watched that. I probably should replace that board, that bracket. But I check these every time I do an oil change. And check your body mounts. There's a body mount there. So now Toyotas, as good as they are, they didn't have very good undercoating. So it's pretty thin metal. So you want to check everything, and if obviously replace it or patch it or whatever need to be done, because you don't want to have holes, because if you have exhaust holes, you don't want to have holes in your floorboards. Have them replaced. Don't be the Flintstones. So let's keep going. Alright, we're inching the way back here. So this is a back U joint. Now it's actually pretty smart. They put a slip here instead of in the yoke of the transmission. Like again on the Turbo 350s, this is the old GM stuff. So yeah, this looks good. That looks good. It's dirty, obviously. We can power wash it. Let's see right here. That's the fill plug for your transfer case. And then of course there's the drain plug. Drain plug, folks. Whoa. What a concept. Right there is the drain plug. Wow. So yeah, this looks good up here. Now my last rant. So we checked, here's the tag for those. And I'll put in the description the part numbers for those springs. Okay. Now let's go back to the rear diff. Everything looked pretty good. We checked the suspension out. Didn't see any of the areas of concern. We're looking for any excessive rubbing, cracked, bottoming out. If the bottom out bumpers, I think they're a technical term, but if those are worn, used, if there's any leakage from your shock absorbers, bushings are cracked or broken or worn, have them replaced. Either you do it if you're confident enough, or have a shop do it. Okay, my biggest complaint, the differential. Now, this isn't a video on Americans versus imports. This is not a video. I do want to say, okay, here's the differential. Okay. Now, let me preference. See that? We're going to focus on that for a minute. This is my rant. Okay, I've worked on Dana's. Worked on GM 10 bolts, 12 bolts, 14 bolts. I've worked on Ford 8.8 rear ends. I have not worked on a Ford 9-inch. Worked on meaning drain the fluid and all that. Well, just drain the fluid and inspection. I haven't done any replacement of gears or rebuild the rear end. But I have done a lot of service. GM 10 bolt, 12 bolt, 14 bolt, Ford 8.8, and the Dana's. And none of them have what this is. Do you see what this is? Yeah, see, it's encased by a nice little protection here. That is the differential drain plug. Wow! I'm so amazed. They put a drain plug on the differential. Again, all those vehicles that I rattled off, you've got to take the back pan off, all those bolts off, just to change the fluid. You got to put a gasket on there. Usually people use RTV. You got to take all those bolts off, and those that have done that, you take all the bolts off, and then it comes out in a mess. Why the hell doesn't any of those rear ends have a drain plug? You see, Toyota put this around a nice little cover, so if you hit a rock, you're not going to bust that off. Why the hell, GM and Ford and Dana, don't you put a drain plug for your differential? Obviously you can get aftermarket diff covers, but why didn't the factory already have that? Toyota does, and they have a fill cap. So, and I've changed this fluid, because first you want to make sure your fill plug, you want to go to your fill plug first. Can you get that loose? If you can get your fill plug loose, you unloosen that, and then you unloosen your drain plug and you drain all your fluid out through your drain plug. Then you use a crush washer, and then you install it back, and then you fill it. Pretty straightforward job. You don't need to take a million bolts out. That's my rant. So I always buy a head. I use Canon oil filters, and I wrap the oil filters in these produce bags to seal them. Always buy a head. I got these from Amazon, but you can get these anywhere. My local parts stores, your O'Reilly's and your AutoZones normally carry these, so I always buy have a couple on hand. So when I'm ready to do my service work on my car, I have my oils, I have my oil filters, I have my air filters, I have everything I need. So I'm not spending half the day at the parts store chasing down parts. I usually plan ahead and store these in my cabinet in the garage. So I always have a couple on hand. So when I get ready to do my oil changes, I have them. Okay, start it up. Make sure it starts okay. It may have a hard time starting if you drenched your MF fluid cleaner here. So don't worry, it's pretty normal. So we're looking good. We didn't do anything, we didn't service in the other area, but it started right up as usual. We're going to let it run for a little bit. I normally look underneath, but after a ways away from it, so if it happens to get out of gear, I don't see any leaks. Let's get over here. I don't see any leaks. That's good. That means we attached everything correctly. We'll let it run for a little bit, fill that oil filter up, and then we'll stop it, check the fluid. So let's check the fluid. Let's check our oil. I take it out, wipe it off, and then put it back in. Seat it all the way, and then pull it up. It's good to me. It's because it's so fresh. We're going to go between those two dots, and it looks like it's right at that dot there. Pull it over. Looks like it's right on the money. So that was about 5 1/4, 5 and then 1/4 quart. And that looks good to me. I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased. So we did a good job. So we're going to take a picture of the mileage. Take a picture with your smartphone. And then that way you have an idea when the mileage was. And then I'm going to show you my spreadsheet that I use for maintenance. I put down all the maintenance, and I put that in a spreadsheet, and I also print it off so I have a record of it. Now let's look underneath the car. We don't have our light, but always we're looking for, the engine is off. It's in park. And we're looking at our fun little drain plug. And I don't I don't know if I could put some light on that to show you, but I don't think it's leaking. I don't think it's leaking. I think that's just residue from leftover, and that's good. So I had to use the gasket sealer, that 3H Permatex Aviation gasket sealer. I love that stuff. So the next time we do this is going to break off easily with the 14mm wrench. It's not like RTV. It's my favorite gasket sealer in the world to use. But yeah, we look good. We're not leaking. Try to shine some light in there. I don't see any leaks. I don't know if I can position the camera and hold. And obviously remove your chocks, your wheel blocks. You may have to back up just a little bit because this is pretty in there. Just have to back up a little bit because when we were jacking it up, always use safety first. Well, thanks again for watching, and I hope you learned something, and I hope